So this is really what I wanted to walk through today, because I hear like these meetings we're doing more like a workshop type stuff. And so I thought I would go through one of my favorite ideation tools, because if any of you guys are like me, I tend to forget things or miss opportunities, and probably have been close to being fired a number of times. It's like Saturday morning and you see your phone ring and you're like, oh, stink, I forgot, fill in the blank, whatever. So this is one of my favorite ideation tools that I've used over the years. We call it our communications matrix. You can call it a marketing matrix. But I don't use this for, did we get off one?
I think we got off a little bit.
Okay. You might start at the back, but you should have a full page one and then a half kind of 2/3 page two somehow. So maybe they printed them off weird. I should have checked it out. So this is a tool. I don't use it like how to manage like week to week, but I use it for ideation. I'll take this on from ideation side, and then once you get the ideas, take it over into like a base camp, some sort of project management to actually manage the projects. If you guys want this file, you can go to churchmarketinguniversity.live, and it will literally download the file for you right now. So even if you're not going to offend me if you get on your computer and you just jump in, and if you would rather have a digital copy, that's how you can get it, churchmarketinguniversity.live, and it should literally download the file like instantaneously. There's not a website there or anything, it's just the download link. So this is the matrix, and let me just quickly show you kind of how this works. Did I nail that? Right. Come on, that's an answer to prayer. So on this, this is how I would approach this. So down the left-hand side is any sort of communication channel that the church has available to it. So for you guys, if you want to grab the file, you can customize it, obviously, to remove some of the channels. You may add some of the channels. As I was going through here, there's some updating I need to do on this. There's some unique things that some churches have access to that most churches don't. Like maybe you have a pilot in your church that flies a plane and you can pull a banner behind it. I don't know. Like that's probably not going to be in the matrix.
I heard Redeemer has it.
Yeah. You guys got one? We need one. Yeah. So obviously you can customize this, but here's the thought behind this: is like when there's something big coming up like Christmas. What I tend to do is we'll get closer to the event, and then I'm always kicking myself because I've missed opportunities. I'm like, oh stink, we said last Christmas that we were going to do this. Like, oh, we wanted to get all our volunteers scarves this year, right? Now it's December 15th, and we're way too into it to really be doing it. So now I'm like, I've missed opportunities to utilize some sort of communication channel that we have. So this is where I love this tool, because the idea behind this is instead of having to think in my brain over and over again all the communication channels, I just go ahead and have a tool like this that has every single thing that we possibly could do on it. And then when it comes time for like Christmas, one of the things that I'd recommend, if you don't already, most churches will do some sort of debrief after last year. So if you're not already doing something like that, I'd highly encourage you, obviously, get into a rhythm of one of the first things that you do after an event is to sit down and be like, how'd that go? Did we hit our goals? Measure. What are we going to do different next year than we did this year? What went well? What didn't go well? What ideas? What type of feedback do we have? And then start your planning, start your matrix with the review from last year. Right, so you not only want to be doing your reviews, but you want to make the most of the reviews that you did, because it's no good if you're coming up with all these ideas and things you should have changed, and then the next year you make the same mistakes again. So the good news in the church world is a lot of times we have very similar events, and if you do the review process, you make 1% changes year in, year out. Obviously, you do it 10 years in a row, and you should be doing something really good, really healthy. So start your ideation process by just putting in there some of the things that were left over from your debrief from the year before. And then that's where I like to get a team together and just start saying what could be done. Like just start throwing stuff against the walls. Like if we had no limitations, if we had maybe unlimited budget, or if we had unlimited resources, like what could be done. And then maybe have a tool like this that the team could look at and be like, okay, last year we talked about like our programming in the service was really cool, but the environment itself was it was not themed well. So like in one of these sections, you'll see like there's a whole section for environmental, like on the second page. So maybe the ideation meeting goes something like this. Like what if we start, when people drive onto the property, right, there's Christmas music playing out in the, we still don't have that Spotify. We need some Christmas music. There's Christmas music playing out in the parking lot. What if we were giving families like literal like hay rides or carriage rides around, and like what if there was a photo booth in the lobby, right, for Christmas pictures? And then what if we had hot, apple cider around the building, so when people walked in, they immediately like, it smelled of apple cider, and like, so you might say to yourself, that's the whole environmental side is one aspect of communications that maybe this year we could do something really creative on that maybe we didn't do last year. And so that's where I would get the team together and be like, okay, guys, here's everything we have available for us. What could be done? What is possible? What could we dream up here? And then here's what I found with marketing is, you guys probably have all heard this. It takes multiple touches for people to get what we're trying to communicate. I mean, we're speaking to communicators here. You guys all understand that. And the hard part, though, is that everything is so noisy that if you use the same communication channels over and over and over again, saying the same things, you're just become part of the noise. So if your go-to, because here's what happens in the church world is, for most churches, even though we have 150 plus different ways to communicate something, most churches will have like 5 of these things, and everybody in the church fights to get on those 5 things. So we have, right, for some churches, it's if the pastor just says it from the pulpit, people think that somehow that's going to be a magic wand and everybody's going to show up to your event. Doesn't work, but some people think that. So, right, pastor saying it, maybe you have video announcements, maybe you have like some sort of slider on the website where it's like, if my ministry could just get on the slider, right, and then everything would be solved. Everybody's going to show up to the Friday morning women's thing. So anyway, we normally have like 5 things. So this sheet kind of looks like this, right? And then all the ministries and everybody fights over those things. What I would encourage you guys to do is how do you take those things and break them out and be like, what are some ways, we've got all these ways that we can communicate what we want to communicate. What if instead of saying, fighting over those 5 things, we could really get creative and use some of these tools that we haven't really maximized before? So, for example, if there is a ministry that wants to announce something and they're trying to get on the web slider that's probably already booked up or you've already moved away from that approach, what if we looked at our Facebook group? Does anybody here have a closed Facebook group for their church? Who all has, like, you'd say, hey, we have a closed,
yeah, we have a handful of them.
Okay, you got a variety. Who has lots of Facebook groups, more than one for their church? And then who has one main one for their church? Okay.
We had a small summer meetup one for the children's ministry, but
gotcha.
It's expired now.
Okay, it's expired, of course. Okay. Okay. So for me, I'm really enthusiastic right now on the power of Facebook groups. I'm a big believer. In my estimation, the Facebook group is now the new Facebook page. If you guys remember 3 to 5 years ago on your Facebook page, you used to put something out there and people saw it. Anybody remember that?
That was a thing at one point?
Yeah, at one point. About 3 to 5 years ago, people actually saw what you put on your page. Now, essentially, Facebook's goal was to bring the world together. That was their mission statement, and they accomplished that, and they realized that this was not what we wanted to do, because when we brought the world together, everybody started to fight. So now the opt-in to see your content is not to like your page, because 1 to 3% of people who like your page will actually see your content. 1 to 3% of people who like your page will see your content. So the opt-in to see your content is now your Facebook group. So what Facebook has realized is, yes, we wanted to bring the world together, but if we just bring the world together, it gets ugly. If we bring the world together around a tight-knit community, that's where it can really flourish and really be pretty incredible. So that's why they're saying now to opt in to really see somebody's content, it really happens in Facebook groups. So I'm very enthusiastic about the power of Facebook groups. And if your church wants to do one where you get everybody who calls your church their home is a part of that group, now what you can do, for example, is if you have a ministry like the Friday morning women's deal, you say, hey, we're not going to worry about the slider, but what if you had a couple ladies who are enthusiastic about the ministry go live into the group and talk about what you're going to be doing. Talk about why ladies should care, when is it going to be, build excitement, and build some enthusiasm around that. Now what you can do is you can empower your ministries to get creative in another channel of communication that isn't the video announcements, isn't the stage, isn't your website slider. And to me, this is where this idea can really help. So again, maybe the Facebook group isn't your deal. You're not like, hey, we're not really going there. But you could create some opportunities here to get creative with your Christmas service coming up. And I think once you sit down and you start going through this, you're going to be surprised at how many different options that you have available to you. You just have to start planning out a little bit farther in advance. One of the things that I found interesting, we've done an assessment of about 2,000 churches. What we wanted to find is we wanted to assess what growing churches were doing that plateaued or declining churches weren't doing. So we asked a church leader, said, hey, tell us first before you answer any of these questions on our assessment, are you growing, are you plateaued, are you declining? And there's some variations there. And then we asked, tell us a little bit about you. We had them take 20 questions, and then we ran the data to see where there's some statistical correlations there with church growth. What were these growing churches doing that plateaued or declining churches weren't doing? We found 7 things that the data said. Has anybody ever taken advanced stats? I don't recommend it. But if you have, what you find is there's a scientific correlation between variables that if you get past a certain variable in your math, then it's saying they maybe can't identify why, but they can say there is a highly correlated variable between these two deals. So that's what we did. There's 7 things. One of those 7 things was if a church is, I think it was 3 months. If a church is 3 months or more out in their planning, they are much more likely to be a growing church. So maybe for those of you who have a leader that maybe is not 3 months out, you can be like, you know what? I was at this meeting today and he said something really interesting. He said, if we want to really see your vision, Pastor, come to life, we need to be planning 3 months out. So for whatever reason, we didn't have enough time to really find where the exact tipping point is, but we do know if you can get a little bit farther out, you're much more likely to be able to reach more people. The reason I bring that up is because of what's nice about a tool like this is if you sit down creatively a few months out and use it for your quarterly planning, it will help you move the church to think a little bit farther in advance. The reason why my guess is to the why that is the case is because I think when you have more lead time, you can get more creative with the communication channels that you're using. Because now, kids, you guys know, if your leader calls you the week of and they're like, hey, I heard from on high, I've just come down from the mountain, and we're changing everything up this week. And you just don't have time, right? So now you're like, well, what can we do? Well, we can send out an email. We can send out a text, we can send out a push notification, and by that point, we probably bothered enough people to let them know what's changed or whatever. But if you have enough advance time, then that's where I think you can get much more creative. And you can do some things that when people experience your Christmas this year, they're going to experience it in a number of ways. And I would say you could even start that experience on social media way before the event itself. And through the environment, through your staging, through your music, through even your follow-up plan, what you're doing after, how you're going from Christmas to the New Year, from New Year to Easter, from Easter to Mother's Day, and you're moving people along this journey, and it's a lot more thought out and strategic than it is maybe like a knee-jerk reaction. So that's my spiel on the communications matrix. What I wanted to throw out for us to kick around is and I think we wanted to maybe even talk about what ideas has everybody seen that has worked. Because what would be cool if you guys want to is you can build out your own ideas, and then if everybody throws around like, hey, I was noticing on here, for example, Facebook ads. Like this year, we want to do a lot more with Facebook ads. Like if you guys have a Christmas Facebook ads campaign that's really worked for your church, like that would be really interesting to hear, to throw around to help each other to know like what's working for you guys, what's not working, and then if you want to fill out like on your own matrix or download it and start putting it in, like go ahead and put that idea down. And what I'll typically do is like fill out all the ideas from like the meeting onto the matrix, and then we typically give it a couple nights to sleep on it, then come back and say, okay guys, that was awesome, but now that we have all these ideas, which of these ideas do we actually think we can pull off in a graceful manner, and which ones do we really want to focus in on? So then we'll go through and highlight those ideas, and then we'll move those ideas into our project management. And that's when it gets put into Basecamp. You start assigning people, you set your due dates, you set your timelines. And so this tool at that point really navigates it. It moves its way, the information moves its way into your project management. So I'm going to sit down and shut up and listen to you guys here. But before I do, does anybody have any questions on this at all, or does it seem pretty self-explanatory?
What happens when we have multiple large events in a month?
So that's a really good one, especially if
Or
you're.
am I looking at it wrong?
No. That's good. So a couple things on that, because as you see up here, what I like to do is start with the big idea. Like, what are we trying to do? One of the things we noticed at my time at James River is, as the church grew larger, I was there when I started, it was about 3,000. When I ended, it was probably closer to 8 to 10. It's probably closer to 15,000 now. And if you've ever been in a church like that, what you find is activities and ministries and programs grows and grows and grows and grows till it's out of control. So one of the things that we notice is that there is power when you start having to focus that back in and say, okay, we'd love to do all this stuff, but we really, in order to be effective, we've got to hone in and do less better. Do less better. So obviously that takes leadership buy-in. That doesn't just happen because a communications director says, hey, we need to do less. Probably not going to happen. But you can, it does allow you to, so part of my encouragement would be say, hey, try to focus in on doing less if you can. And if you can move that, we found that to be much more effective. And then secondly, I would start with a tool like this. I would just start with, what are your big ideas? Yes, the church is doing a women's thing, and a conference here, and a marriage thing, and a kids thing, and a youth thing, and there's 30 different things, and that's all great. And I think all those have their place in some sort of base camp. But for this tool, I probably would use it for like, what is the main thing? Like if somebody bumps up against our brand this month, what do we want them to walk away thinking about our church and feeling like that? This is the tool that I think you use for the main things to really make sure that because if you miss the Friday morning meeting, the creative way to promote that, and that deals with 5 to 10 people, that's one thing. If you miss the big picture that deals with hundreds or thousands of people, like that's a much bigger thing on that front. So for this case, I would probably keep it pretty broad. The other thing I have included on here that I'd like to do is include some of your other ministries that allows you to get some synergy in the church, if at all possible. This is another shift I feel like we've experienced is, if your kids ministry, your student ministry, the adults can be on somewhat of a similar page, it makes life so much more easier, and it makes your brand so much more compelling, because the church isn't fragmented and going in multiple directions, and you get so much more oomph to your marketing. So for example, one of my big pet peeves or one of my big soapboxes is I feel like churches miss the mark when it comes to Easter. I feel like we measure the success of Easter based on how big our attendance is at Easter. I feel like that is a huge missed opportunity. I feel like success is measured the week after Easter. So one way I would say to use this matrix is on Easter Sunday, the goal of Easter Sunday is say, what do we need to do to get people back next week? The goal is not to get people to your Easter. The goal is to get people back the week after your Easter. So if your kids' ministry, for example, I'll use this analogy, what would happen if you went to your kids' point person and you said, Sally, you do a great job, awesome, we're pumped about Easter. What if I told you, Sally, that for every kid who comes back the week after Easter, I would give you $100 for every new kid that comes back? How would Sally plan different their Easter if you told her that? Sally would probably say, oh my word, okay, well, I'm gonna really shift. Instead of maybe doing a ton of creative stuff and prizes and giveaways the week of Easter, what if we did the week after? We split it, or what, So you take that thinking, that big picture thinking, and now you get the students involved in the student planning. So now the students are kicking off a huge thing the midweek after Easter, right? The kids are thinking about that. So their huge series is firing off the week after Easter. So I think you use this tool as like this big picture planning of like, how are we moving the church forward with communications, the big idea, and then we're getting everybody on the same page, so our marketing communications has this weight that is carried with it, and we're all kind of thinking strategically kind of about the big picture. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but that's what I would try to do. But I know your pain. But
Well, we call them the big rocks. So we have the high, the medium, and the light.
Yeah.
Not low. Nobody wants to be called low.
Sure.
And right? And so then everyone figured out how to make theirs a medium. Everyone's figuring out how to make theirs a high.
Yeah.
Check all these boxes. So then this last year, we came out with the boulders.
Because everybody was a high, so they needed a
You
boulder.
get it,
And I have boulders because, your capital campaign, your Easter, your Christmas, those are boulders.
Yeah.
And then you have, so.
Now we have mountains.
Yeah.
2019. We don't have mountains.
Exactly.
We don't have mountain
So
ranges.
it's just, it's making that gap bigger between like, well, actually now all of the highs that you thought were high, they're really like low, like now. Like everything's either a boulder or light.
Yeah, and that's a hard challenge. One thing that we went back to is how do you get everybody to row in the same direction? Our pastor John at the time used this analogy. How do we move from an apartment complex to a house? Like in an apartment complex, you have all these families that are all doing their own thing, whereas a house, you're all working together. You're all working together as a home. And again, this is not easier. This is much easier said than done. But if ministries can round the corner, our goal is not to do all our own individual things, but our goal is to operate as a house. We're all going after one vision. It's just that my part of this rowing may look a little bit different, this sub-segment. And that's what we're going back to. If you can get everybody, there's only one big rock, right? And the students are there to flesh out that big rock in the context of student ministry, not for the student ministry to have their own rock. So I know that is a huge shift, but if you can ever get there, it's a totally different world than everybody's got their own boulder and you're all fighting for space on the mountain, because that puts the communications person in a very hard place. I'll also explain a passive-aggressive technique that you guys can use that I've done before.
Everybody's taking notes.
So what I would do in those times where I was overwhelmed as a church communicator, and I was like, if one more person comes to me and asks for this, I'm gonna have to go home because I'm having a bad day, is I would literally fill this out. And I would do it landscape. And I would have everything that was on our plate, like mapped out on here. And it literally, at James River Times, might be 10 sheets deep, visualized. Now, I wouldn't necessarily walk in and say, woe is me, but if you were having a meeting, and I had a sheet like this, and then somebody's got a brilliant idea, like, well, what if we added a Thursday night, potluck or whatever. I'd be like, okay, well, let me see. Okay, you said October, right? So everybody in the meeting could visualize then, okay, so the Thursday night potluck is not the only thing happening at the church, without me having to say anything. So there are some passive aggressive ways that you can use this matrix. Use that. The other thing I would do at James River, is that was a season where we went through a season where it was really hard to determine boulders, rocks, or whatever. So I had to get comfortable leaning back on our leadership and being open to go back to them and say, hey, Pastor, and this is where you could again have this, and you could say, I'm overwhelmed here. Like as you know me, I have a heart for the church. I have a heart for you. I want to do, but I just want to be honest with you. Like I've got to my breaking point, and could you help look over with this for me and see if there's anything that we could remove off here? And every time I would do something like that, he was always so gracious to say, absolutely, let's go do this. And you know what, Ryan? The Spanish translation thing that I was telling you about, let's table that. And you know this, hey, let's put that off. And so just having a way to have open and honest conversations with your leadership and being willing, and there's we could do a whole session on how you navigate the whole boulder, rock, light thing, but those would be some things I would encourage you with, and ways that you could use this tool maybe in that process. But all great questions. That's probably all where we're living. So, any other questions on this?
When you're working through this, do you do it with like who's in the room when you're working through this usually? Is it just you kind of putting ideas down, or is it with like your team or the fellow communicators of the church, or is it with like upper leadership of the church? Who's kind of the ones that are working through all that?
It could be any or all the above. I've done a deal where, our creative team, at James River times, we'd have basically a room like this, but one more table, and you've got different people represented, normally with some sort of gift in the creative brainstorming, and you could break something out like this. And I might not even use this to drive the meeting as much as just to collect ideas. So as ideas are flying around, right, I'm just going in and just putting it in. I've done this where I've sat down by myself because maybe the church has asked me to come with creative ideas for what could we do different at Christmas this year. So now I'm just going to use this to go through and be like, okay, here are the things I really want to dial in. Facebook ads, Instagram, what if we do the whole lobby? What if we have live bands? So I might do it personally myself, or there's been times where if you have a big project, like somebody mentioned, like a capital campaign, we might take that team through something like this, like what are going to be the rhythms of the capital campaign. So maybe instead of this being a tool that's used for like a big picture, all church communications, this could be a tool that's used like, what is the capital campaign going to look like? Like what if we had the guest speaker that's coming in November speak to the fact of the capital campaign? Right? Like if you have an outside speaker and they can say, hey, what I see you guys doing in this community center is awesome. Like, way to go. If you're supporting this. So now you haven't missed the opportunity to have your guest speaker speak live in your capital campaign, so that's what the type of stuff like I don't want to miss. I don't want to miss that opportunity of, well, how could we leverage this channel of communication, even as obscure as it is, to help move the church forward with the capital campaign? So that's the thought. So it could be any or all of the above. Yep.